Hi, I'm John Niehaus, Director of Program Development for the National Association of Flight Instructors. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of the NAFI More Right Rudder podcast, the podcast for flight instructors on the go. And today I have a special guest with me. His name is Dan Dyer. He's been a flight instructor for about 19 years. He is a CFI, II, and a Hilo instructor. He's a former flight school owner and currently is the Director of Operations for San Carlos Flight Center. And right now, he specializes in teaching other instructors, and that's something that at NAFI we're very passionate about as well. They have developed a program that they call the CFI Finishing School, and Dan's here to talk to us a little bit about that. So first and foremost, Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. It's a great podcast. I like instructors talking about instructing. I love it.
Oh, well, thanks. And, before we get too far into the actual program of CFI Finishing School, which is a great name, by the way, let's find out a little bit more about you. How did you get into flight school ownership and how did you sort of step into this role of teaching other instructors?
I started flying late. I think I was 38 when I first got into aviation. I had a career change and just decided out of the blue I was going to be the helicopter pilot for the TV news and started taking helicopter lessons. And along the way, learning to fly was fantastic. And I didn't really feel safe as a private helicopter pilot, so I kept going until I became an instructor when I finally felt safe. And At the time, I was also dabbling in teaching and business or marketing, doing some aspect like that. And teaching aviation just ended up being amazing because I love teaching and people love learning about aviation. And so I decided to kind of tweak my interest and stay as an instructor. I got in an airplane and enjoyed teaching in an airplane and taught as a flight instructor for many years. And I probably still would be doing that if the school I was teaching at it just wasn't, I don't know, fun enough. There were things that I kept butting heads with in terms of curriculum or activities and planning. And so I just decided I was going to start my own flight school and try to be the best school in the country. I did that. That was that was a really exciting journey. And along the way, when you own the school, you end up being chief pilot. And teaching, I went from teaching individual students to teaching the instructor corps and leading the instructor team. And I really love that. I still really love working with new instructors, helping them get more experience and get more direction. So, as you said, my role now is more as a train the trainer to help instructors be more effective.
That's excellent. Now, out of curiosity, I find that when I talk to flight school owners, especially those that were instructors significantly or for a significant period of time before starting a school, that sometimes that transition can be a little bit of a struggle. How was jumping from instructor to owner? Was that a tough transition for you?
So, I mean, I like event management, and so setting up and planning things. When we started out, I didn't buy a school, which probably would have been cheaper. I started one from scratch and went from tiny to bigger and bigger and bigger. So right. I was always learning about what to do, and I just am comfortable making mistakes and then trying something else. And so the whole course of the building the school was a training environment for me to learn what it was like to be an owner and to learn what it was to be a chief pilot. And I thought that ended up giving me a really great perspective. I mean, the flight school that I'm at, we acknowledge that it's a training environment and it has to be okay for students to make mistakes as long as they learn from it. And so it was always important to me at my flight school. It had to be okay for the instructors and for the staff. It had to be okay for us to try things and make mistakes as long as we were learning from it. So I kind of felt my way through the dark in building the program. I wouldn't change a thing though. It was really great. It was a great experience.
Comfortable making mistakes. I like that. I feel like that needs to be written on a tattoo somewhere or something. I don't know. So CFI Finishing School. Tell me what that is and how it came to be.
So there's a lot of great CFI training programs around the country. I have friends who run schools and run CFI training programs, and that's fine. We've been teaching CFIs at the Flight Center for a long time, but what we found is this kind of came about as a result of our hiring process. We're known for having very effective instructors. And in our hiring process, we're constantly interviewing CFI applicants, and they just weren't coming up to snuff of where we're hiring. They didn't have the depth of knowledge, or they just didn't have the right focus. And what we realized is CFI training programs, they do really well at their goal, and their goal is to pass the check ride. Their goal is to pass the knowledge test and to pass the practical test. And that's absolutely fine. And it's a really important step, and you have to do it. Once you get that certificate, though, then you start teaching. And I remember when I started teaching, I think it was probably 6 months in before I really felt competent as an instructor. I fumbled around as a new instructor. And so I think it's very common for people to come out of the CFI program with good intention, but knowing just enough to pass the test. Sometimes we talk about in the private pilot world that the FAA standards are you have to be 70% good to be a private pilot, and you keep learning afterwards. And the truth is that 70% pass rate applies to instructors taking their check rides too. So you can pass the knowledge test knowing 70% of what you should, and even in terms of the check ride, you can maybe not know everything perfectly. And certainly you may not know how to do it effectively with one-on-one with a student until many months after teaching. And so we were always struggling to bring in instructors, great people who wanted to learn, who were passionate about effective instruction, but just hadn't had the time to get up to speed. And so for years, we've been building up our CFI indoctrination program, the new hire program. They come in and they go through a 4-week period where we're building them up and giving them the additional depth in ground topics and helping them understand the role of the CFI in a greater depth, maybe. And we finally just decided, we do that for new hires. Why don't we allow other people who want to get to that level of, effectiveness, that they have their certificate, but now they want to finish. And so we started offering a CFI Finishing School and welcoming in instructors, either if they want to someday teach for us, or if they want to go become a better, more effective instructor and go back to their school or their flying club and do that. It's really a place for people who are really passionate about instruction as a profession, and really want to get to a deeper level, a more meaningful level than really just having the certificate and sitting next to somebody in a plane.
So there's a key thing I just picked up on from what you just said, and that's it's not just for your new hires that you allow instructors from other places to come in and try to learn to be more effective and better educators. That's an interesting thing. How does that work when you get somebody who maybe has been instructing for a little while mixing in with brand new instructors in your class?
There can be a little bit of a tension there. I mean, because there really are two types of instructors. There are brand new instructors who are wet behind the ears and have a certificate and no experience. And then there are other instructors, maybe high time instructors, who are coming in with knowledge that may be out of date, or practices and behaviors that are now ingrained that maybe aren't effective. And it can be, there's a little tension there working with somebody who's very advanced and trying to help them see that there maybe can be a more effective way to do student management or to approach a maneuver in a different way. But one thing I like about the Flight Center is we've always been on this quest to find better ways to do things. And so when I travel around the country, I often stop at any flight school I could visit just to see how they do things. And if I see a great idea, we do like, oh, that's such a great idea, we should do that. We're just really passionate about sharing knowledge with other schools or seeing what other schools are doing. Our motto has always been, if you're not on our airport, you're not our competitor. And as schools and around the country and as instructors, there's so much more we can share with each other and learn from each other, and help all the rising wind raises all airplanes kind of thing. And so we do get some instructors with high time who want to approach it afresh. That doesn't always happen. It's easy to get set in your ways as an instructor. This is the way I've always done it. This is the order I always do it. And so much more, we probably get much more of brand new minted instructors with a new certificate. Maybe they're applying to schools and they're not getting hired anywhere. And this is a way for them to get, to raise their personal level of competency so that they can get hired somewhere. We also occasionally get people who are working on their CFI. Sometimes we've let in a CFI candidate, somebody who's working, hasn't taken the check ride yet. Although really when somebody's working toward their check ride, their focus needs to be on the practical test and the knowledge test, and go get that and then come to us and we'll have a deeper conversation about what it is. I think the way to think about it is if you're an instructor, you might remember that you started teaching and you kind of made it up on the go and you just kind of clung in there and you hung on. And then about 6 months in, you start having conversations that are like at a meta level. You start having a conversation with other instructors like, why do we teach stalls? What's really the essence of what's going on here? And so those conversations are what we spend a lot of time talking about at CFI Finishing School, trying to bring that additional depth to somebody even before they've worked with their first student so that they can maybe get a head start on teaching.
That's great, because I like you remember my first 6 months, and it's a lot to figure out on your own, especially if you're at a Part 61 school that may not do a lot of CFI indoctrination. It's all you, and I did the best I could, and I think I did right by my students, but I think I could have done a little bit better too. So
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, any instructor knows those first 6 months, first year, you are learning as much as your student is learning. It's different, but you are learning as much as they are. And I mean, I have very clear memories of going to senior instructors almost in tears and saying, I have no idea how to tell this guy how to land. This guy is, I remember one student was, every time we did the climbing right turn in the pattern, the yaw just broke loose and was flying all over the place. And I hadn't processed anything at any sufficient depth that I knew what was going on. And I had to go to another instructor and say, you got to walk me through this. And so that's what CFI Finishing School is, instructors helping instructors kind of at a deeper level.
I love that. I love that. And there's probably a third group in there too, right? Do you get a lot of maybe instructors who are coming back to the profession? Maybe they've gone and done some other things and taken years off and come back to try to get acquainted, or does that not happen
that's true.
much?
We have had that where somebody was, successful in business and did something else with their life, and now they're at retirement age, and all what they really want to do is teach again. And they've been out of it for a while, and they want to, the ACS is completely different now than it was when they started, and there's new maneuvers. And yeah, we do get people who want to reconnect with what's happening currently in aviation, or to push themselves deeper than they did back when they were training.
Cool.
We talk a lot about the role of the instructor, and I think in a way that isn't really taught or talked about in a lot of other programs because people just haven't had the experience with it. So an instructor who taught for a while and then went away, when they come back, they're ready to have that conversation about what it means. What is this role of being an instructor, and how different is it from what people expect? And honestly, we're at the Flight Center, we think it's completely different from what most people think when they think flight instructor.
So touching back on the program,
I think a lot of people think being an instructor is like, you can fly really well and you can sit in the right seat, and then people will learn by osmosis. And it's so different from that.
So touching back on the program, and I think you have hinted at this, but how is this different than sort of your standard instructor indoctrination for like a 141 school or a university or something like that? What do you guys do that makes this specifically a finishing school?
So it came out of our own indoc program. So it probably has much in common with a 141 indoc program. We probably push way deeper on some advanced ground topics. We probably push way deeper on the purpose, the maneuver training theory as opposed to just maneuver training. And so it's a little bit more, okay, close the door. We're all instructors. Let's talk about teaching. It's a little bit more than that, as opposed to just saying, do this. If you put tab A in slot B, then your student will pass the 141 syllabus. And so it's a little bit more philosophical. I think it's a little bit more big picture.
So what kind of topics are you referring to when you're covering these things?
So the program's divided into maybe four major categories, but where there's like the role of the instructor, there's a bunch of advanced ground topics, there's a bunch on student management, and there's a bunch on maneuver, flight training theory. Like in the ground topics, I think there's a huge chasm of what somebody needs to know to pass the knowledge test and get their CFI certificate. There's a huge difference between that and what you need to know to look a student in the eye when they say, what? You say, hey, here's the learning test. And your ability to know it at a depth so that you can present it in a way that gets past whatever their initial roadblock is, that you really do understand what's going on, way past rote. That's something we have to spend a lot of time on. We have a list of things we call the 20 hardest private pilot concepts, and for years we used it in CFI hiring. And most CFIs with a new certificate would get maybe 4 out of the 20 questions right. They've just never been pushed very deep. I mean, if most new instructors, you ask them what is density altitude, they will say pressure altitude adjusted for non-standard temperature, which is the rote of the knowledge test. Yeah. And it's maybe how you calculate it, but it comes nowhere near answering what is density altitude. And your student will look at you and they want to know what it is. And so going that depth, getting to that depth with ground so that you understand it, not just rote, but at a functional level, that's what we do in CFI Finishing School. And we, in our hiring process, we ask new applicants to submit a teaching video, and a lot of them choose to submit one on left turning tendencies. And there's just a lot of pilot urban legend out there in left turning tendencies. And so we get people who submit things that they heard from their instructor, who heard from their instructor, who heard from their instructor, and it's just wrong. It just doesn't really apply anymore, or they don't understand the fullness of it. I've had candidates look me in the eye and saying gyroscopic precession doesn't happen with nose wheel airplanes. And that's like, okay, that's somewhere along the way you got a shortcut answer and you stop there. And that's not true. That gyroscopic precession absolutely affects anything with a spinning propeller, with a single propeller. And so we go into that depth for ground topics and try and get people to understand it at the level they need to. So when the widely diverse student group looks them in the eye and says, I don't understand that, can you try saying it another way? That they have that depth to access it and say it another way.
It's funny because my next question was actually going to be, what kinds of things do you find that you have to help instructors unlearn? So obviously gyroscopic precession and left turning tendencies might be one of those things, but what other kinds of things are you seeing where instructors are coming in, you're going, wow, I need to get this habit out of them so that we can make them more effective?
So if we go way highbrow, how lift is created. I mean, there's things we know in the last 20 years that they weren't teaching 40 years ago. And so, everyone says Bernoulli and draws pretend wings and talks about it. And we've just moved so far away from that you're missing out if your pat answer is lift is created by Bernoulli. And I think you're doing your students a disservice, because if you really teach your student how lift is generated, they understand the need for the smooth flow over the wing and how frost destroys that. They understand that the different ways that the pilot can control the amount of lift is generated. So at slow speeds, they inherently understand why flaps add safety. And so, the lift equation can be written in all manner of different ways, and it can be a bit academic, but there's a purpose there that really does save lives. And that's, helping your student understand the method that lift is created is not just some rote answer on a knowledge test. It really does critically matter when you're pre-flighting the airplane, or when you're making decisions about how to operate the airplane. So that there's a lot of pilot urban legend about induced drag that's just wrong out there. There's I don't know if you spent any time teaching instructors, but high to low, look out below. There's some real value there, but people who use it twice have to understand it's two completely different ways to use it, and most people use it the second way wrong. And so there's some ways that if you've ever been a flight training environment where there's 4 tables and 4 instructors and a lot of training going on, and you hear other students one-on-one, I remember years ago being in that environment and hearing some things that were passed down from instructor to student, and then instructor to student, and a lot of it just has been superseded, or because of that, the telephone game, something got wrong a long time ago, and it just keeps getting perpetuated. So many instructors will say P factors caused by the propeller taking a bigger bite, which they think implies angle of attack differences, and it turns out that's really not what's going on, but it makes for a nice soundbite, and it gets passed down for generations. And so there's a level of ground for instructors who are really passionate about being able to answer the question from your student who's a physicist, or the one who's an engineer, or the one who isn't. The different students are going to have different depths of questions, and we're trying to prepare the instructors to have like a broader pool to source when responding to student questions.
That's great. I wish I had that when I was first starting out, because I actually did have an engineer student, and boy, some of the questions I got, you never want to say I don't know, but of course you never want to make things up either. And you knew that a engineer is going to probably call BS on you. So
Yeah.
that was a struggle for me. So you had submitted a little bit of information on this course prior, and one of the things that caught my eye was the difference between maneuver training and maneuver theory training that you guys do. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, maneuver training, to do a stall, to pass a check ride, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you meet the ACS standards, and it's done. And that's maneuver training. Maneuver theory training is when you sit down with an instructor, especially a new instructor, and you say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing the stall? You really just need to sit next to your student until they pass the check ride? Absolutely not. Especially in stall training, there's some real fundamental issues. We absolutely need the student to have an inherent sense of an impending stall. Like, they can detect it, they know the conditions in a variety of different configurations. And we absolutely need to build into them an automated quick response to recover from a stall. So those are real important goals for maneuver training. And then deeper than that, during stall training is a fantastic time to deepen the pilot's control of the aircraft. And so the way we do stall training is really specifically designed to emphasize stability and eyes outside and control. I mean, we emphasize yaw dampening during stall management, not because the ACS says it. It's because during that point in the student pilot's training, we're trying to improve so that rudder control is automatic. They look outside and they just do the right thing because it keeps them safe. And so we use stall training as a way to make them land better. We use takeoff training. We do an entire takeoff lesson well before they work on landings. And if we do it right, if we teach them the right way to take off, they land better. If we teach them the right way to taxi, they land better. So maneuver theory training, some of it is helping instructors realize it's not just sit next to them until they pass the ACS. There are some interim goals for airplane control and skills development that we're working on the long game for. We're trying to build a pilot that has an instinctive safety and depth of aircraft control, and so that's some of the things we talk about in maneuver theory training. And I mean, it's just something we're passionate about. It doesn't mean we may have it completely wrong, but sometimes I'll read or I'll hear stories of somebody saying that they can teach somebody to solo in 5 hours, and it just scares the heck out of me because we never let anybody into the runway environment. We don't do landings until we know that at altitude that they are completely at one with the aircraft, that they see the yaw, that they feel the pitch, that they can hold stable, that they can. And once they're complete master of the aircraft, we bring them down into a landing environment where they extend the mastery of that control in this kind of dangerous situation. And we just feel like to do anything else, to put somebody into maneuver training without them master the prerequisite aircraft controls, it's just you're not doing them a service. You're not building any long-term safety or aircraft control. I often get asked, what's the best way for a new instructor to improve? I mean, talk to other instructors, of course, but honestly, the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, that book is really the difference between a good pilot and a good instructor. I mean, a good pilot can do the stuff, but an instructor teaches. And that book, I mean, there's some silliness in that book. There's some FAA acronyms and stuff. About half that book is a little bit silly, but half of it is pure gold to the instructor. The laws of learning are pure gold. If you don't understand how true they are and how powerful they are, and you don't use that to inform the order you use in your syllabus, or you don't use the laws of learning to understand whether you're creating a distracting environment and getting in the way of your own instructing, you're missing out. And so I think that's what we mean. Like, it's not just you don't just do a steep spiral, or you don't just do a steep turn. You don't just do a crosswind landing. Every one of those, even though the goal is to do that maneuver correctly, the real goal is to increase control of the aircraft and to add fundamental skills and depth along the path to the check ride.
Yeah, I like that. I've done some interviews in the past. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but it's one of my favorite quotes over the last couple of years, and that's excuse me, the ACS and the PTS are the worst you can possibly do and still pass the check ride. And it's incredible to hear how far you guys are taking that to make sure that, as you say, the mastery of the airplane is there. And not just with your students, but with your instructors. They pass the check ride, and who knows, how well they may or may not have done on that, and that's okay. But you're bringing them from that ACS to up here, and that's always refreshing to hear.
Yeah, and we use FAA source materials. We source FAA materials and we build off that. So, I mean, I definitely don't want to attack the ACS. I think it's true that you can pass a check right at the 70% competency level. That's just kind of how they grade things. But I do like how specific the ACS is about defining the check ride. I do like that. And also, when they went from the PTS to the ACS, the raising in profile of risk management to be the third leg of the stool, I thought was fantastic, and that fits in really well with the way that we approach things too. I mean, I talked about in the CFI Finishing School, we spent a lot of time talking about the role of the instructor, and you're not just sitting next to somebody. A flight instructor, I think, is unique in the educational community because you really have to be three types of instructor. You have to teach ground. You have to be a classroom style instructor. To teach risk management, you don't teach risk management. You model risk management. You show by example risk assessment and making good decisions. You model risk management as an instructor in the same way that a parent kind of does. And as a flight instructor, I think you don't really teach flight instruction. The truth is, eye-hand coordination skills, muscle memory skills, you don't teach a student. They teach themselves through trial and error. So your role is to give them exercises and to create a laboratory, a safe place at altitude for them to do exercises and teach themselves how pitch works and how the rudders work. And so in that sense, we're much more like a coach. And I know of no other kind of teaching position where you have to be three completely different modes of instructor. And I think that's what makes flight instruction really interesting.
Yeah, I've always found it incredible how many different hats we have to wear as instructors, because you just never know what you're going to encounter that day.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time at the flight center. We spend a lot of time talking about, if a student's struggling to handle a maneuver or a skill, we say, you're creating the exercise. That's all you do is create the exercise. Tell me what the exercise you've created, and if that exercise isn't working to have the student self-teach them the skill, here's how we could change the exercise a little bit, and maybe that will help them focus in on the one dimension that they need to, or how can we remove distractions, or how can we give them a different context or something. Really, the flight instruction portion of it, you are much more the designer of learning than you sit next to me. Here's how you do a stall. Up, this. No, nobody learns flight training by watching you move the controls. And so I think it's really fascinating. I love flight instruction for that reason. You really are creating the laboratory for the student to teach themselves.
So out of curiosity, I mean, when you have these new instructors, certainly there can be some fear associated with being new to the job, right? You have to learn to give the students some leeway to make the mistakes that we've already talked about. What's your best advice for an instructor coming in who is trying to build that comfort level, but maybe they're still a little, frightened of doing stalls with students or landings with students? What does that look like to you?
So I mean, it happens to all of us. I think the best thing we can do is tell each other stories. So I mean, in CFI Finishing School, I talk about the first demo flight I ever gave, where I walked around the plane. I got the student in the plane. We sat in the plane. I go to start the engine, and the student said, "Shouldn't we take the ropes off the plane?" I had, it was my first demo flight. I hadn't even bothered to remove. I did the pre-flight except for removing the tie-down chains, and I was like, "Oh yeah. I take all the ropes off, start up the engine, we go off." And then halfway through the demo flight, it finally dawned on me that I was in the pilot seat and they were in the right seat, and I was like, okay. So we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do things that you're not going to be perfect in those first few months. But what you have to be perfect is you have to keep them safe. And you can recover from a stall, and you can, if you can keep them safe in the landing, then that's okay. And then just listen to the stories of the other instructors about what we were all nervous about it. There's imposter syndrome is a very legitimate thing, and it goes away after 3 or 4 flights. And we just talk about with instructors, just bear with it for 3 or 4 flights. And the truth is, if you have a very strong syllabus and a school that supports you and adheres to the syllabus, as long as a new instructor is one lesson ahead in that strong syllabus, and that they understand that one lesson, they can be very, very effective even from the very beginning. And so mentoring from older instructors to younger instructors, or having the school support you with training materials. Our syllabus that our students see has 2 hidden sections for every lesson, and the 2 hidden sections, only the instructor can see. One of them is teaching tips, where it goes into, okay, here's how you actually teach it. Here's the exercises that seem to be really effective here. Here's the very common way to describe this, and all of that came just from other instructors. Anytime one of our instructors comes up with an innovation, a better way of saying something, or an exercise in the plane that makes it very easy for somebody to acquire a skill, we just drop it into the legend book, the instructor guide, where all our best learning from old to new is passed. But it's never going to go away. You're going to be a new instructor. If you do everything right after a couple flights, it starts to go away. And also you realize that you really are being effective, that you're being too hard on yourself. You are being effective. They are learning fundamental skills. You are keeping them safe. You're helping them reach their goal. And it goes away after a few flights.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm assuming that built into that, one of the sort of passion projects for NAFI here is instructor professionalism. what kinds of things are you sort of baking into these lessons about instructor professionalism in the industry?
We talk about just, there's what professional means in terms of like timeliness, and appearance and mannerisms and all that. With regard to flight instruction, I think we spend a lot of time talking about how, being the coach in the plane means giving feedback in a way that grown-up adults may not be used to. And so there's a lot of really bad ways to give feedback, or unprofessional ways to give feedback in the air, that may inadvertently destroy the lesson. If you as the instructor give them some feedback of something that's not critical to the lesson at hand, you've distracted them, and we may lose the value of that session. So we do talk about being professional. We talk about student management with regard to, here are some common student emotional situations and how you need to be, what's the word?
Cognizant, maybe?
Not passive, but you don't react to it, right? Some people are very hard on themselves as students and may lash out, and how to deal with a student that's projecting or something. You have to be at peace.
It's another hat to wear, right? We're psychologists in addition to flight instructors and leaders, communicators, coaches. I like that. That's what you've been saying quite a bit. So it's just another hat that you have to be able to understand.
In the plane, you have to be a student whisperer.
Yeah.
And you have to watch the maneuver and watch the student, and somewhere in there is the grain of what went wrong. And you have to see it and go, okay, let's try that again, but we're going to do hold that first maneuver a little bit longer until you're stable, and then go on to the next thing. Or even as simple as understanding, you as an instructor, you have a great bandwidth for stimulation, and you can be listening to traffic and radio calls and have it not throw you off your game. But a new student who's at the edge of capability may be rattled by every traffic call that goes off, and understanding that because of that capability difference, you need to maybe have the radio down, or figure out a way to have the radio only playing in your ears or something like that, or go into an area where you have less traffic to worry about or something. So those are my favorite conversations, when an instructor, maybe a new instructor, maybe an advanced instructor, will come in and say, here's what's going on. We're working on this, and here's what's happening, and here's where the student seems to be stumped. How do we work that muscle out in the massage? How do we work that knot out? And we talk about, okay, well, it may be that this is what's happening here. Try this exercise to help them move past that one little barrier and see if that unlocks them. And so, that the role of the instructor as the detective, figuring, because like I said, they're teaching themselves. You just have to watch it and create ways that you continue to challenge them in a way that they're building up safety and they're building up skills in kind of the order that's most effective.
I think that's great. And as we start to wind things down, kind of back to sort of the finishing school program itself, you've been doing this for a while, and just wondering, as you measure sort of your effectiveness from the beginning to end, how are you feeling about it? Is it working for you? It must be.
I mean, we talked about it for a long time before we started the program. We'd always been doing the indoc program. And we've always done CFI training, but we hadn't really approached it as an isolated, a separate training program. And we've been really happy with it. Now, when people are applying to be instructors, we don't really know anything about them, and we're trying to see what their ability is. We try to see what their passion is. We try and see what their professionalism. But with hiring, it's a very hard way to do that, and none of that appears on their their CV or their resume. And so we've been really happy in that the finishing program gives us a chance to see people who are instructors, to see how well they take in new information, to see how they can approach kind of the big picture thinking we're talking about. And I think it also gives people who are attending the finishing school a chance to see how this one school does it, and how a very structured syllabus might work. And after that, we can decide if sometimes there's a fit that the right thing is for them, that we'd offer a job to somebody who does really well in the class. But even without that, I think what happens is they can go back to their school and maybe beef up their syllabus a little bit. Instead of just doing, and then we do a stall, and then we do something else, spend a little bit more time and build a little bit more structure, so that they can raise the student to higher standards than just the check ride. So we've been real happy with it. I mean, we were able to borrow a lot of the material from our CFI Indoc program, but because we were offering it to outsiders, it really forced us to come at it anew, and think about it in a way that somebody that was going to go back to their school would get the fuller experience. And so that we did create several modules that we just all ate and breathed it, but we had to create a module so that for somebody that was new to it, how could they take value and take it back to their school? So yeah, we've been very happy with it, and it's very much fits in. Like I said, we just think aviation is so fun and teaching is so amazing, and just if there's any way that any other school can benefit from what we're doing, or that anybody that knows a better way to do something wants to share with us, we love that exchange of information. And so welcoming in outside instructors to our program, even if they go back to another school, has been, we just love it.
So if I want to do this, how long is it start to finish?
We do it in a 4-day program. There's an option to do in-flight training for instructors that want to actually see how we break down some of the flight maneuvers and some of the specific exercises we do, or how to approach it in a deeper way. We'll do in-flight training, so some people may stay a day or two after that to do more flight training. But as a big group class, we do it in 4 days, Monday through Thursday. We do it a couple times a year. The next one's in February. If anyone's interested in the program, I think you can just search CFI Finishing School. I think we're the first thing that isn't an ad that pops up, or go to the website at St. Carlos Flight Center.
Okay, yeah. So you told me it looks like the next one is February 6th through 9th. And then the one after that, if it's too soon for you, if you're interested, then one after that is in May of 23. So a few months down the road. Can you say that website one more time?
SanCarlosFlight.com.
SanCarlosFlight.com. And just out of curiosity, and maybe it fluctuates, but I'm assuming there must be a cost associated with this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of stabilized. It bounced around for a while. The 4-day program is $500. If you want to do in-flight training over the next, a couple of flights to learn some of the maneuvers, it's an additional cost to pay for the airplane time. Really, I'd have to look up what that is.
Sure. Cool. Well, I think it's a fantastic program. I'd love to learn even more, and I'm sure there's another time for that. But I love what you're doing with instructors. It's always nice to know that new instructors have support. It's also nice to know that there's a place they can go to be better. Being better is something I think we can all strive towards, no matter how long you've been a instructor. And so for that, I appreciate that you guys have created this program.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I like this podcast. I like the work NAFI's doing to have instructors help each other. I think it's a great profession, and the more that we can help each other, the better.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of, if we always have to push the same rock up the same hill, then every new instructor has to start from the bottom. And if we can find a way to just make that hill a little bit less tall, then everybody starts a little bit further up. And it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah.
So once again, Dan, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing this knowledge with us and information on your program. I look forward to hearing more good things about it, and hopefully you'll come back and join us again.
Great. Thanks, John.